Okay, so we'll start today's webinar. Ian should be joining us shortly, hopefully. But please feel free, if there's any questions, please feel free to chuck them in the chat as we go along. And then myself or Ian, when he joins, will look to answer those for you at the end of the session. So today's session, system malfunction straight away. So looking at the agenda, it's 6 months, refinancing within 6 months. So the agenda, what sits behind the 6-month rule, the day one refinance and how Landbay can help and how we consider these, some case studies, and green and refurb properties at the end as well. So the CML 6-month rule. So just obviously a little bit of brief information about the CML 6-month rule. It's there really to protect vulnerable vendors, also the lenders themselves, but it's to protect from obviously any potential selling of the vulnerable, making sure that people are not vulnerable when they're selling the properties on. That doesn't just include yourselves buying it as you've owned it for less than 6 months, but it also includes if the existing vendor has owned it for less than 6 months too. So these are all checks that are done in place, and the CML have rules and regulations around this to make sure that obviously individuals and lenders as such are all covered and protected by these particular rules. So the CML rules have to be followed by all lenders. Majority of the lenders, they do lend on the lower of the purchase price or the value within 6 months, but using a higher value is possible with some lenders, including us. So some examples here on the left-hand side, apologies there. Buying it from auction, market value is 25,000 higher. The vendor is in financial distress, needed a quick sale, and they market a value 30,000 higher and just a few painted walls. So obviously looking at where the vendor is in a distressed situation, a cheap purchase there, that's something that obviously we wouldn't be able to consider and wouldn't be able to help with. An auction purchase and spend 25,000 to improve the property. Purchase 22nd of August, no works completed, and a no works refinance at purchase price. So that are type of situations that we can consider here at Landbay. So one of the case studies we have, an auction purchase at 100,000. A bridge was taken out or savings were used to buy the particular property. Cost of works being 30,000 to rewire the property, new kitchen, new boiler, bathroom, and a full redecoration. The new value there of 150,000, and that's where we can consider a 75% remortgage with the property being owned for less than 6 months. So what we're looking for there is we're looking at a substantial, well, not so much as substantial, but depending on obviously the value of the property, we're looking at works have been put in to improve the property, and then we can look to consider lending based on the new value of 150,000. One of the things that we do tend to particularly ask for in these type of situations is we do ask for proof of these works in the form of whether it be invoices, money spent out as in bank statements, as we are aware that some people obviously will carry out the works themselves, but bank statements should show that sort of information. So we do tend to see and hope that we can see that information there with regards to the work that's been carried out. And as long as we can see that, then we can look to lend on the increased figure. So there's a requirement, obviously, in January 2025 for the new EPC rules for all new tenancies, being a requirement of A to C. This was where Mr. Hall was going to be joining us as he has some figures here. So what we can do is a couple of questions here, and if you just put some of the answers into the chat, and then when Ian does join us, we can obviously see who is the closest. But what percentage of landlords do you think are not aware of the new rules? And also, what percentage of landlords do you think plan to raise capital to complete any works on those particular properties? So some of the, obviously the types of works that could be carried out to improve the EPC rating of the property would be new boiler, new electrics with using the LED lights, cavity wall installation, new roof, obviously new insulation in the roof, new windows and that as well. And all that would help to increase the EPC ratings on those particular properties. So I can see a few of the questions a few people have answered with regards to the figures. Hopefully Ian will join us shortly. He does have the figures for us, and then we can see who is close in those particular figures. Flicking back briefly to the remortgages of properties owned within 6 months, and as I briefly touched upon, what we look to ask for here at Landbay to make sure we can lend on those type of properties and help you for 75% if it has been owned within 6 months. So we ask for a breakdown of the works that have been carried out. Obviously, if someone's carried out just a bit of painting and bits and pieces like that, we wouldn't anticipate that would massively increase the value. So breakdown of works, which is we require, the costs associated with those works as well. We may ask for invoices depending on how we deem the costs and if we can't see them in the bank statements as well. So looking at the breakdown and the cost of that. Once it gets to valuation stage, we're also looking at the valuer has confirmed that works have been completed. They will look at things like Rightmove, Zoopla, where the property may have been listed for sale, or even auction websites. They will look at the pictures that are potentially on there, and then they will look at obviously the work that's been carried out when they visit the property and they do the internal inspection. One thing we're checking as well is that we have full transparency in the transaction. We're looking to make sure there's no distressed sale, there's no sale and lease back, etc. So that's where we're looking here. We're looking to make sure there's no issues with potential vulnerable vendors, to make sure we're fully comfortable with the whole transaction. And what if the vendor is a contractor? As I briefly mentioned, if the vendor is likely to carry out the works themselves, that's not so much of an issue to us. We're more than happy with that. But what we would look to see is we'd look to make sure we can see the money going in and out of the bank statements to the necessary companies where they may have purchased all of the goods to maybe renovate the kitchen, boiler, things like that. So we can be quite flexible, but we do need to make sure that we do have a full breakdown of works. What we do tend to like with a 6-month remortgage, we do look at them on a case-by-case basis, and we like to see that the applicant does have what they call skin in the game. So we do like to make sure that they do have their own money still secured within that property, and that they're not looking to borrow completely, where they borrowed to purchase the property, to then obviously borrow some further funds and over and above what they may have put into the transaction themselves. So some housekeeping. So Ian has joined us.
I am really sorry. Go on. Do you want to carry on?
I'll carry on, Ian, yeah. Actually, before I carry on, Ian, you have the figures. So I've mentioned about the questions with regards to the percentage of landlords, about the works, and with regards to improving the EPC. So I didn't know if you wanted to just give a bit of context on those figures. We've got some.
We did, yeah. So we did a landlord survey, around 600, and the take-up was pretty decent. So marketing-wise, it's kind of good feedback. The suggestion was that about 40% of landlords were not even aware that there's a green EPC requirement for properties to be A to C in 2025, which is a huge margin based on there's a lot of government press around this at the present time. Obviously, there's a lot of landlords that hadn't even thought potentially that the property they're buying needs to be a C rating within the next kind of 3 years. And obviously existing landlords as well, that know that this rule is in place, i.e. the 60%, obviously probably not looked at the cost as well. So there's lots of different kind of information that would be very handy for brokers to take out of that. The other stat as well is that about 65% of those landlords that were actually aware of the changes, or obviously including the 40%, would also then need to borrow the money from whether it be second charges, further advance or refinance to actually complete the works that are required to make the property suitable standard for A to C, to make sure they could continue renting that property from 2025. So that from a broker's perspective is fantastic kind of information to use as marketing in regard to going out to your brokers, going out to your landlords and say, listen, are you aware of these changes? Let's make sure you get you in for a nice little review, and obviously take advantage of the rates that we've got on the market now to raise the capital to start looking at those works that are required. And we'll probably have another session a little bit more detail, and I'm not trying to distract from obviously what we're talking about today, the day one refinance, but obviously day one refinance is very relevant because the clients do the work, they improve the property, they can then pull the money back out, and that can include these things like the efficiencies that works like windows and roofs, etc., will add value to the property. Not all works do add value in regard to making your property more EPC, a high rated EPC, I should say. So yeah, apologies, I butted in there.
Cheers, Ian. So just carried on with the day one housekeeping, really. So what we'd like to do, just make sure you check the circumstances of the original purchase itself. Check with the applicant the list of works that have been carried out to make sure that they would cause a significant uplift, or not even significant, an uplift in valuation for us to be able to consider lending on that higher value rather than the original purchase price. Check other values in the area and other properties that may be on the market for sale to make sure that the figure that you're being given is in line with other properties currently on the market in that particular area. The uplift you're being told, does it seem realistic based on the level of works that have been carried out? I mean, we have had examples where they may have bought a property for 60,000, painted the walls, and believe it's now worth around 100,000. So we need to make sure that the works that are being carried out do give a realistic uplift with regards to the value. Also check the situation with land registry to make sure it ties in with local sales and properties there.
I meant something different on that as well. Just go back to that if you can. So the things, obviously, Bret was going to cover this as well. With the land reg, obviously, they're miles behind as well. So when you're doing a day one refinance, obviously, it's worth checking the situation with regard to when that client's name is going to be recorded on the land registration. Bret may have mentioned that in the last couple of slides. No, but the other thing that I think with regard to check the list of works, that's really relevant because one advantage we do have at Landbay, kind of not taking away some of the bits that Bret's mentioned there, you've got two different scenarios. If I was going to do some work, I bought a property at £100,000, I spent £25,000 on the property, and it might be worth 140. But what you might find is that you've got a tradesman buys the property for 100 grand. Actually, when they list the works are as long as the works that I've done, but obviously the costs are not going to reflect the amount of money that I've spent on the property. And obviously the benefit of having the detailed list of works is that the underwriters will be able to understand, well, actually that client was a tradesman, therefore that a lot of the work they've done themselves, or a lot of the actual stuff they've gathered together are friends and favours from guys or ladies they've done work for before in the past. So obviously a contractor will spend an awful lot less than £25,000. So again, that just kind of builds on the product we've got at Landbay in regard to the fact that we look at the new uplift in value. We don't look at the cost of work. So lots of lenders in our market space do 75% of cost of purchase, then 75% of the actual cost of works. We are looking at potentially 75% of the new value of that property within that 6 months.
Yeah, and just going back to the land reg situation as well, Ian, I think one good thing that we do sometimes accept is if the same solicitor is acting in a transaction, not quite registered at land registry, as Ian alluded to, the land registry are a little bit behind at the moment, but we can consider looking at the TR1 document as well. If the same solicitor is acting in the transaction, we may not necessarily always need the individual to be the registered owner at land registry if we can see the same solicitors acting in the transaction and we can see the transfer document to show the price being paid as well. So we can be flexible around that side of things as well.
Shall I do this?
Yeah, this is your.
I'll take. Excellent. Again, I am sorry for my delay today. I've had a nightmare. So obviously, I just wanted to bring in some of the key benefits you have with obviously the day one. There is no difference in product. The only thing you've got to make sure is the max LTV is 75%, but you do have access to every single product on board. And obviously, we've got fixed rates on the right-hand side starting from 2.84, and that's for the small portfolio landlords. The clients maybe only got 3 and buying their 4th. The benefit is that it's based on pay rate as well at 2.84, and it is now the lowest in our kind of field, excluding the likes of Godiva and kind of Virgin Money, etc. We are the lowest pay rate 5-year fixed rate on the market at 2.85. We've also got a green one at 2.95 for large portfolio landlords, and then our core range is 3.04. So all very, very competitive. As I say, the green products are allowed. So if you've got some clients that are looking to do a day one refinance, maybe try and build into them the fact that, well, all right, your properties are sit at D here. What extra works, as well as the works you're going to do to improve the value, what other works can you then do to actually take that property from a D to a C? Because not only will it maybe add a little bit more value, but then the benefit is that client's then going to get a slightly cheaper rate as well. So it's worth building that to the kind of information you discuss with the landlord in regard to the uplift potential in the property. Look at what the products you can get by doing that a little bit more work when it comes to what EPC works are required. And I say land reg updated by the new vendor, as Bret suggested before. We can look at the TR1, but obviously the circumstance with regard to land reg, they do have to be recorded before completion, I believe, Bret. But we can go to offer with a TR1, which is
we can go to offer with a TR1, and we have, if there has been some urgent situations, we have, as long as we can see that there's the registrations pending on land registry, so long as the solicitor is acting, we have allowed completion to take place with undertakings from the solicitor, so long as it is the same solicitor. So the flexibility is there, but the majority of the time it is we offer, and we would expect to see them registered before completion.
Thank you, Bret. That's great news. I didn't know that. Normally by time, because obviously an actual offer from a lender actually speeds up the process with regard to the land reg, actually looking at the client having an offer that actually kind of expedites the registration of the title. So it's not a frequent occurrence. And obviously if no works were completed and the clients did benefit from an auction purchase, which is potentially slightly lower value, and maybe they painted the walls, then obviously we've got to wait that 6 months, as one of the slides said earlier. But the benefit is with Land Bay, you can apply in the 5th month, because obviously we know that it will take a couple of weeks to actually get that process up and running. So we know that the completion will actually take place outside of that 6 months. And again, apologies, I wasn't in the previous slides, but the thing that if you do speak to a BDM, the thing that lots of lenders are very concerned about is distress sales. Yes, everyone wants the right deal and they want the right price, but obviously as a lender, and brokers and landlords, we've got to be responsible for making sure there's not someone that's the original vendor has not been left in a position where obviously they were taken advantage of by the person that bought the property. We have got to be very careful with that scenario. I don't know whether Bret mentioned that the reason why the 6 month rule is there is obviously because of that 6 months, there is a potential for unwinding the whole transaction if something has come up that's untoward with the transaction. So actually, looking a little bit more sensitively and ethically at this, there are some circumstances, and I have seen some circumstances of this nature, where you can avoid that whole thing being unwound. So say, for example, someone bought a property, £50,000 under value, did a bit of work, it's then worth 170. Actually, if that transaction is unwound by whatever legal parties get involved, made administrative for the vendor that went bankrupt, that created this issue for them to sell it under value in the first place, an administrator can unwind the whole transaction and make that client that's bought that property for £100,000 responsible for making the right purchase of that value of the property. So actually could cost them an awful lot of money if not done ethically. You can apply when the works have been completed, application when the works have been completed. Obviously, you can apply just before, but obviously we want to make sure that the value is going out when the works have actually been completed. You want to try and avoid a re-inspection. And obviously, one of the final things, the benefit with day one, it's available for standard properties, HMO or multi-units. I would encourage you, if it's an HMO or a multi-unit, maybe to speak to your local BDM, because more metrics come in play when you're looking at HMO, because you might have taken a standard single dwelling, converted to an HMO because it's in the right area for kind of HMO demand. There are some requirements with regard to making sure there's enough equity left, because originally the property would have been bought on a standard bricks and mortar valuation, but because we do HMOs and multi-units on investment valuations, we've got to make sure the uplift is sensible in regard to the difference between the original purchase and the new value. And last thing, product-wise, we've got some products with no tie-ins as well, which obviously if your clients maybe did the day one refinance to sell the property, then decide actually the rental market's really strong, they're not sure whether they want to keep it 2 or 6 years, 2 or 5 years, then the tracker product obviously allows them that benefit of, yes, they need to be renting the property, but obviously they can, with the tracker product, they can sell at any point with the tenant in situ, obviously. And I think I've covered most things. Just to reiterate last bit, some criteria points. So 5-year fixed rates with us, at pay rate. Again, day one's included. You can do it with commercial. From the previous presentations, we do limited company, we do trading companies. We offer first-time landlords with no experience, and obviously at 70% restricted to 70% LTV, and for small HMOs. For standard HMOs at 75%, we are looking for 12 months experience, which is still pretty generous in the market at the moment. And green products, again, I mentioned before, we allow new builds to be included in our green range, which if you look at the market, there's quite a few lenders in our space that actually restrict new builds. But obviously the majority of properties that are A to C will actually be properties that are built more recently. So I think that's a good thing for the market to be including new builds. And I'd like to say I've done a lot there, but unfortunately Mr. Mason has done most of it. So thanks for listening. Any questions? Is the chat there? Have we got any chat? We've got Ben asking. It's I mean, there's probably not many questions. Hopefully we've covered an awful lot there, because day one refinance is fairly simple. But I think just looking a little bit deeper kind of will, I don't know, answer those questions that are going to cause you troubles in the kind of processing the application form of the application. So therefore doing it right and asking some of the questions we've asked today will ensure that the case has got the best chance of conversion to completion. So if there's no more questions, thank you for listening. And again, sorry I was late. Thank you, Mr. Mason.
I think there's a question just come in, Ian, actually, from Joanne. Thank you. Very interesting. Are you on sourcing systems? As I don't seem to see you on Mortgage Brain.
Thanks, Joanne. We are. We joined obviously the open work panel about 4 weeks ago. I spoke to an open work broker only this morning about why we weren't appearing. There's a couple of quirks you have got to be aware of. Unfortunately, we don't do repayment. And I'm finding quite a few open work brokers are looking at repayment when it comes to buy and to let. We only do interest only, I'm afraid. We do have an income requirement as well. So with Mortgage Brain, you've got to put the income that combines to 25, whereas it's combined income. But unfortunately, with Mortgage Brain, I think it shows that one person's got to hit 25 because of the way that Mortgage Brain works. So I checked the income. We do have an income requirement that's £15,000 as well. But that's for experienced landlords that have got more than 24 months rental history. So hopefully there's some of the, again, I please do contact your BDMs, because we should be sourcing. I think we have got the top of the tree product with regard to limited company at the moment, with regard to that 2.84. So we are very competitive. We should be sourcing very, very, very well. Maximum age for landlords, 85 on standard. When it comes to limited company, though, we allow, if you've got myself and Bret, obviously Bret's a lot younger than me, and I was going to hit 95, but Bret's only 10 years younger than me. Actually, we'll take myself at 95. So we'll extend the age by that 10 years if you've got a younger director that's on the mortgage application form. So we got to 95 in theory. And that's something I think that that's going to become more relevant, and we are pushing. Both myself and Bret are involved in lots of criteria stuff, and things like age is very relevant, because the age of a limited company essentially is irrelevant. It's the age of the clients, you could argue, but obviously the relevance of a limited company is that the shares being passed to the children and the grandchildren all the time. So therefore they're involved in the limited company on a day-to-day basis. So it's a really relevant point. Thank you, Joanne.
I think we've had a previous question submitted beforehand as well, Ian, about are day one remortgages available to foreign nationals buying in the UK? So that's something that obviously at this moment in time, it's because we don't consider foreign nationals buying in the UK, unfortunately. So that one, they wouldn't be applicable to those individuals.
It's a tough market, that, and obviously I'm in sales and Bret's in criteria, credit. I think it's a tough one. We used to do expats, and we're hoping we're going to be back in the expat market. Foreign nationals is a different kettle of fish. Foreign nationals is a really hard market to break. Unfortunately, I guess it's going to be a packager for that kind of stuff with you guys, TFC, TBMC, or whichever packages. I can't remember. TFC and TBMC are definitely on your radars, I believe. And I've had a question from David. Thank you, David. Yes, we do. We actually don't care what number of properties the client has got in the background. We use a system called the Buy-to-Let Hub, which is also known as eTech, which looks at the background stress to make sure that it's at 125 at 5. However, we've got a little bit of flexibility on the LTV. So the LTV might be a little bit higher, but the rental yield is really strong, so well over 125 at 5. Then we've got a lot of flexibility when it comes to background stress. In very few cases, obviously I can say this because I'm up north, very few cases I find fail our background stress. I guess the ones that do fail might be more kind of southern central London, where the value is really good. Obviously the LTV is really strong, but unfortunately the rental calculation is a lot lower, because obviously that landlord's gone for capital appreciation rather than kind of the monthly yield, etc. Thank you for the question, David. Tell you what, this is the best session with regard to you should do more, Bret. Would you be able to offer auction properties, especially? Yeah, it's a good question. That, thank you, Amanda. We could, obviously you got to bear in mind with an auction, unfortunately, by all means you can apply, because obviously if you're purchasing the property, the client can do the offer, so they can do the valuation, they can do the admin fees. But the downside is that you've got to give the valuer a figure of valuation, and you've also got to hope that you actually win the auction on the day. So yes, you could, but obviously you don't want to be wasting the client's money. You can get to the point where you're literally about to apply, and we'd accept an adjustment in the valuation just before you're about to apply or before the val's about to go out, because you don't know then you've done it. But the good thing, and hopefully Bret will agree with this, if I was discussing an auction purchase today, the one thing that we can't promise, because we're pretty good with service, we're about 3 days at the moment, but we can do things that speed the process up. For example, if you put a case into us today, we can get the valuation instructed today. Yep. Because the one thing we can't control is how fast the valuer is with regard to going out to the property and then coming back with a report. So that's key with regard to an auction purchase. I'm not saying we can't do them, but I'm saying you've got to make sure that all your ducks in a row, and obviously the valuer is the key process in that element. Unfortunately, it's beyond our control, because we do panel our valuations to third parties. But I get your client's point. Obviously, if they do negotiate the price prior to auction, then of course we can work on it. But obviously, I guess, Amanda, you've got to wait until the actual auction is kind of, whatever that word is, where it bangs down and agrees the price on the day. But obviously, pre-vet, if your clients wanted like a dip, you can do a soft dip, because you can do a decision in principle which doesn't reflect on the client's credit profile, not many questions for you. You can definitely do a dip, and I'd encourage you to maybe refer the property that the client is buying from auction to the BDM. Thank you. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for listening. See you later.